Hey guys, Whitney here. I know everybody's filing into the room. We're going to give everybody just a little bit of time to do that. While you're doing that, make sure that you have found your Q&A box. That is the simplest way for me to keep track of all your questions and make sure that we get it either answered live or in writing or in our after party. And since you guys are joining live, just know, like, after we're done kind of recording the interview session section of our session, we will cut to an after party, and this is where our we get to kind of do some rapid fire with our guests and also get them to maybe answer some things not recorded. Anyways, you guys are filing in here. This is fantastic. Okay. So if this is your first time joining, welcome to Passive Investing Made Simple. I'm Whitney Elkins-Hutten. I'm the Director of Education here. And this is a live show where we deep dive into the various topics related to passive investing and help you learn and put the knowledge into action so you can confidently go into your first or next investment with us here at passiveinvesting.com. So be sure, if you want future episodes, be sure to register at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. And you can also check out our current deals there. We have 3 current deals going on, as well as 2 funds. So if you guys are interested in any of those, make sure to go to passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com, fill out the application there, and you can drop right immediately on my calendar and we can talk about what we got going on here. So with that, I wanted to bring on a very special guest, Dave Foster, CEO of the 1031 Investor. Dave is a degreed accountant and serial real estate investor who is also a qualified intermediary and consultant for tax saving strategies such as the 1031 exchange and the Section 121 Homestead exemption. Guys, we were just chatting before we pressed record today. Dave and I have done some work together. We did 1031s last year. We had a nice little laugh on like the outcome of those, and I'm sure Dave will share those in the middle of the show. But anyways, Dave, please take a moment and just introduce yourself and how you got into real estate in general.
Hey, Whitney, thank you so much for having me back. This is awesome. Yeah, actually, you're out in my old neck of the woods. You're in Boulder. And I started my very first property was about 12 miles south of you in North Colton. And if you're traveling down Highway 93, for all the Colorado folk, if you're going down Highway 93, what used to be a bunch of dairy farms and pastures, that used to be our house and all the dairy farms and pastures. And now it's what? All kinds of houses, isn't it? Yeah.
Hundreds of houses.
Yeah, that was where I got my start. And it's kind of a fun story. 1031 Exchange is where I live, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit more later. But the way we stumbled into that was on a search for freedom. And I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people, because whether it's your 9 to 5, your education, ultimately, that's kind of what we're all looking for, is the freedom to pursue and do what our passion is. Now, I just kind of happened to stumble into real estate because I wanted to be a dad and raise my boys on a sailboat, my kids on a sailboat. I didn't know what I was going to have at that point. And I don't know how a guy from Kansas and a girl from Minnesota who meet in Colorado could have ever decided that they wanted to live on a sailboat. But that's what we did. And so we embarked on this journey to reach that. That was our freedom. And the best way we found to do it was through real estate investing. And along the way, we learned a lot of hard knocks. We learned a lot of easy lessons. And one of the things that I picked up was that my passion, what I love to do, is to invest in real estate. And I'll never stop. So I'm never going to lose my job, and I'm never going to retire. I'll do it as long as I live. And the other thing that I love to do that I will probably never quit doing is helping others get there as well. And the 1031 exchange is the vehicle that I found. That and the 121 exchange, those are the 2 best things going to help you get to that dream. So that's me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I tell the story to our listeners quite often about how I got started in real estate in 2002. And really it was with that first property. I mean, there were so many things I did right that I didn't even know that I was doing right. Took borrowed, used private money lending in order to secure my down payment on the property. But the cool thing that I did was I utilized the 121 exclusion. And I want to stress to people that are listening here later in the show, I'm like leaving a little like nugget here. Stay here, because there are some powerful ways to combine the 121 and 1031 that I think I know you have shared with me, and I'm like, my mind just like went. But before that, I know you did a lot of fix and flipping. So walk me through how you even got into the 1031 exchange arena. Was it when you were like doing like a lot of the fix and flipping and just realized you were giving away a lot of your profits? Like what, walk me through
Oh,
that.
that's exactly it. I mean, let's face it, fixing and flipping is fun because what are you doing? You're creating something that's not there. And for those of you who are good at it, you get it. You look at a house and you don't see it the way it is. You see it the way it could be. Not a lot of people really have that gift. And so for those people that want to develop it or that have that, it's the greatest thing in the world. And I discovered early on that was just, it was so fun, particularly right when they did the demolition part. Give me a hammer and let me tear something out. And I'm a happy guy. I'm a simple guy. But that's exactly how I discovered the 1031 exchange. Was my very first fix and flip. I thought was way more successful than it was because my accountant delivered the bad news to me about my silent partner. You know, you used hard money. I had a silent partner and his name was Uncle Sam. And he was worse than any hard money lender ever. And I just thought, okay, we had the 10-year goal to sail away. And I looked at it, I said, man, if this is what it's going to be every time, our 10-year goal just became 20. And I'll be drawing Social Security at our last port of call. So we decided to fix something. And that was right when the 1031 exchange underwent a revision that made it available for just everyday investors like you and I. I had some great friends who mocked me mercilessly and then said, by the way, Dave, we're starting a company to do this for others. I said, count me in. And that's how we started.
Awesome. Sign me up. I'm ready. So let's talk about that in layman terms. What is a 1031?
So the 1031 exchange, there's one way to think about it is that for real estate only, it's like your own 401k or IRA that's not inside your retirement account, right? We all know the power of a retirement account. We put money into it, contribute every year, and it cuts our taxes down. And all of the money that's made by the money that's in that retirement account is ours. We just don't get to touch it yet. So it grows and grows and grows, tax deferred. And then you finally start paying it when you draw it out at the end of your life. But what's so powerful, if it's used correctly, is that it allows you to harness this thing called compound interest because the tax you saved goes into the 401k. It makes money. All of that money is not taxed. So all of the money plus the deferred tax then goes and makes more money. And it just compounds on itself. And that's what Albert Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest because of the power that it has. The 1031 exchange is exactly the same thing, but it's for real estate you own outside your retirement accounts. So with the 1031 exchange, you sell investment real estate that you have a profit in or that you've owned for a long time, and you've got significant depreciation that you've taken advantage of. We can talk about that more in a moment if you want to. You sell that property, you use the proceeds in a process that's very rigid to go buy new investment real estate. Now, that real estate can be anywhere in the country. So you could sell in California and buy in Colorado. It could be any type. So you could sell single families and buy multifamilies. It could be any type of cash flow return or any type of use. Vacation rentals, commercial, industrial, doesn't matter. But you buy that property using the 1031 exchange, and you do not have to pay. You indefinitely, that's a key word, defer the tax you would have normally paid immediately upon the sale of your property. And so over the course of time, as like you keep those rolling forward, we've got an example that we use in our classes. And that's why I wish you and I were talking about things to post. I wish I would have had it, because it shows in 4 transactions over 20 years how 2 investors do only one thing differently. And that is, one of them takes the deferred tax and uses that as a down payment to buy more real estate. The other investor pays the tax and they use what's left to buy more real estate. Now, the power of that, just in the first transaction, is that if you sold for $100,000 profit, and in Colorado, you're probably going to pay 20% federal and state on your profit. That 20%, instead of having only $80,000 to buy real estate with, you get to also use the $20,000 deferred tax. So you're able to buy in your first transaction a $500,000 property with 20% down. The other investor that doesn't do the 1031 loses that $20,000. So because it goes to pay taxes. So they're only able to buy about $432,000 in new real estate at 20% down. It's $80,000 difference. You compound that over 4 transactions. And at the end of 20 years, the investor doing the 1031 exchanges owns a portfolio worth almost $12 million, simply using the deferred tax to buy more real estate. The other investor owns a portfolio worth about $3.5 million. Now, I'm not going to cry for them because that doesn't suck, does it? But who would you rather be?
The other guy.
Exactly. And so that's the power of the 1031 exchange. And all you're doing is selling and buying real estate, just like any other real estate investor does.
Okay. So walk me, there's so many questions that I have here. So one is, what type of investor should actually consider the 1031 exchange? I mean, there has to be somebody who this is for and somebody who this is not for.
Yeah, I mean, my real quick answer is, if you like money, then you do the 1031s. If you don't like money, don't do them. If bills that you owe keep you up at night, you've got to think hard about the 1031, because that deferred tax doesn't go away initially. So that's a concern, because there's a certain type of person that likes to just, boom, make it happen, start with a clean slate. So that person's got to think about doing the 1031s, because you're leaving tax dollars legally unpaid. But can I tease you with how long you can actually leave them unpaid?
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question, is like, what's the exit strategy on this?
Okay, the answer is forever. There's never going to be a reason you have to pay them, but simply owing them can sometimes get people. Now, fix and flippers, we started talking about them. Fix and flippers are not good candidates for 1031 exchanges, because 1031 exchanges are only available for those people who own property with the intent of holding it for productive use. So buy-in holders, people that love to start renting property, or here's another hack, fix and flippers that can adjust their horizons. So instead of fixing and flipping, why don't you fix it, rent it, refinance it? Is this sounding familiar? It's kind of like the bigger pockets BRRRR method, isn't it? Refinance it and then rest for a while. And while you're resting, take the refinance money, go buy your next fix and flip project. And then what's the last R? Repeat it. So then you finally sell that first property, but now you've owned it for a while. And while you've owned it, you've generated income on it. You did a refinance, so you're able to buy your next project and start working on it. You got the advantage of the tax write-off of depreciation. And now because you bought it and held it for a year, it's eligible for the 1031 exchange. What are you going to do? Go and buy your next one. Actually, what you're going to do, Whitney, is do what's called a diversification exchange. You'll sell that property, use the proceeds as down payments on two more. And that's how you throw gasoline on that fire.
Very cool, very cool, very cool. Okay, so you kind of glossed over the exit strategy of this, and you've teased everybody saying like you can like leave that tax bill paid forever, but I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure that we like communicate.
Okay, it's time. Yes, we're good. But are they going to promise they're not going to leave the meeting? Stay till the end?
No, because
This is the cream right here. I call it the 4Ds of 1031 investing. It's the model I'm following. It's the model a lot of my investors follow. D number 1 is defer. Don't pay the tax when you sell that real estate. Defer it using the 1031 exchange. The second D is defer. Anytime it's time to sell a property to get out of way of maybe looming capital improvement items, to move to a better cash flow market, to change sectors of real estate, to change locations, do the 1031 exchange. Keep the tax deferred. Do you know what? Can you guess what the third D is?
I'm going to go with defer.
Bingo. Because as you start to move through your real estate investing life, there's a natural transition from active to passive, from less put the foot on the pedal, let's grab properties, to more strategic thinking and placement. Things start to slow down, rightfully so. So you can start to use 1031 exchanges to put into properties that have a longer horizon for you, like commercial properties, where instead of an annual lease, it's a 20-year lease. Or you can start to position them into properties that are maybe close to where you want to retire. So that instead of you moving to retirement and worrying about all your properties back up north, you simply retire to Sarasota, Florida, where your properties await, and you manage them there. Or you start to think about buying that property that is an investment property because it qualifies for 1031. But wouldn't that be a really nice property to move into in a couple of years? And it's because you can convert properties. And this is part of the 121 thing we're going to talk about. You can convert properties from investment into your primary residence without a taxable event. How cool would that be to buy the house of your dreams using tax deferred dollars, wait a couple of years and move into it? I mean, that's awesome, isn't it? So I mean, that's the third D, is positioning. Now, I would ask you, but then I'd have to probably trap you, so I'm not going to. Most people would think the fourth D is defer, but it's not. It's die, isn't it? Because when you die, your heirs inherit your property at what's called a step up in basis. All of that deferred tax over the decades disappears when it goes to your heirs. So you get the benefit throughout your lifetime of making money on the government's dollars and enjoying that. And when you die, your heirs get the benefit of inheriting properties tax-free, and you just created a legacy of wealth for them like they'll never be able to see in anything else. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the end strategy for the 1031 investor.
And it's so powerful. And there's one thing, you know, I want to help kind of connect the dots for a lot of our investors here, because a lot of them invest passively and actively. Yeah. And for those of you that are just like on the passive side of investing, I mean, the same strategy, 1031s can apply there too. If you're working with an operator who has the intent to do a 1031 exchange at the end. And I mean, I know here at passiveinvesting.com, we do that. It's not our intent. That is our strategy. That's what we do. And it's not the easiest thing to pull off. And I know you're probably going to poke fun at me for my 4 last year that I tried to do with you. But the 1031 exchange, I mean, it is powerful, and you can leverage that exact same tax savings benefit, tax deferral benefit with passive investing. And
Yeah, to everybody listening out there in Whitney land, I called her the greatest failure I'd ever had because you did, was it 2 years ago or last year? You attempted 4 1031 exchanges with us, and you could not find good properties for one of them. Now, okay, now we joke, because, but that's actually an awesome strategy because you know what? You probably had, I mean, a bunch of tax. I mean, close to $100,000 in tax that you were going to have to pay. And you took a swing at those things. I think, for three or 4,000 bucks, you bought a lottery ticket to see if you could save $100,000. That's not a bad thing to do because there's no penalty for starting and not completing a 1031 exchange. So I know exactly what you did. You took a swing at it. It didn't work. No big deal. You took your post-tax dollars and put those into some very nice passive syndications. And you're happy as a clam because you've made up that tax money. Now, would it have been nice if you could have found the replacements? Sure, because there's this thing that I call defensive investing. That is such a plan. I'm actually writing a chapter on that right now in the unnamed book, but look forward to the next 90 days. And when you buy properties to replace your 1031, your requirement is to purchase as much as you sell and to use all the proceeds that you get from your sale in the purchase. But you can allocate the proceeds any way you want. So if you love to buy and hold invest, why not buy one property for cash and use maximum leverage for the other property? So you sell a property for $500,000, it generates $300,000 in cash. Take $350,000, go buy a property for cash. Use the other $50,000 as a down payment so that you can get to your $500,000 mark. Well, voila, you just deferred all the tax. And what do you have now? Well, you've got a property that you hopefully got with good money that's you're still going to generate some income from. You also have a property that you own free and clear. Now, that's a beautiful thing to have if you're looking at a recessionary environment and you're worried about that. You're worried about maybe a glut of rentals. All you got to do is just adjust the rent to keep the lights on. You're not worried about paying debt service. But here's the other thing that's so powerful for where you and I live. And that is that you can take that $375,000 property and refinance it at will. And when you do that, the 300,000 or so that you get in cash, that's not a taxable event. What are you going to go and do with that, Whitney?
buy more property.
Or how about put that into the syndication
Passive
you've
investing.
always wanted to be in?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing? You're starting to transition, keeping everything tax deferred with the 1031, but you're actually able to start moving into syndications. And I guess we should maybe mention the reason why syndications are problematic is that so many of them, you're not buying real estate. And you have to buy real estate to finish your 1031. So what you're buying is a membership interest in an entity that owns real estate. So they don't qualify for you to purchase as of the second half of a 1031 exchange. That's why the refinance is so important, because you bought real estate, but then you refinance it, and now you can put that into the syndications.
No strings attached on the refinance money. That's amazing.
Exactly.
And I know we have a lot of investors that come to us because we will offer, allow people to 1031 exchange into some of our properties, the multifamily and the self-storage. And if
Beautiful.
you guys, and if somebody's interested, just reach out to me directly and I can tell you the different limits. But, the limits generally are pretty high because we're having to do, some legal maneuvers, with the titling on the property, and it only makes sense, say on 500,000 or more on self-storage or $1 million or more on multifamily. And people are coming in with a lot lower 1031 exchange dollars. And so that's a beautiful strategy. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, what Whitney's referring to on the why they're able to do it is because they're able to carve out a percentage of the property itself and actually sell that to you as the investor as a tenant in common. So you sold your 1031 real estate and you're actually buying a part, an intra fractional percentage of the real estate that's in the syndication. And yeah, there's a lot of legal maneuvering that has to happen, which is why you need those limits. But there you go, right there. There's two ways to do it. If you're a high value investor, then you can simply use the 1031 and buy the tenant in common interest. If you're not, the refinance is an awesome way to still get your foot in the door and keep everything tax deferred. And I heard you allude to this, Whitney, and I don't think anybody else caught it, but the exit strategy for the passive investor, we are finally starting to see patient syndicators. And by that, I mean syndicators that aren't just selling the property, paying the tax hit, and then waiting till they find something new. They're actually strategically using a 1031 exchange for the entire syndication. And you'll locate your property that you want to go into next. Then you will sell your current property, and the entire syndication moves into the new property. Oh my gosh, what that means is once you got your foot in the door, you're set forever. You're never going to pay tax. And Wendy's going to do all the work. You don't have to do anything but go along.
Oh, awesome. Yep. I mean, I do that strategy myself. I particularly love it. And, I invite people to, have a conversation with us if you think it might be a good fit for you. Now, I do want to go back to the 121 exclusion because I'm not sure everybody knows what that is. And I know I teased at the beginning is the way that I started maximizing my position in real estate. Let's first define it and then start, building, showing people how powerful it is. And then I want to connect the dots between the 121 and the 1031 exchange.
The single most powerful wealth building tool in the entire IRS code. Hands down, nothing like it compares. Know this, learn it, love it. So 121 deals with people that buy the houses they live in. You buy a house and move into it. And if you sell it when you have lived in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to sale, then if you're single, you get to take the first $250,000 of profit tax-free. If you're married, it's the first $500,000 of profit tax-free. You don't have to jump through hoops. You don't have to do anything but buy it, move into it, and live in it. And here's the thing that's so powerful is that since 1987, if you prior to 1987, you could do it once in your lifetime. So people would wait, right? And that was actually why during the Leave It to Beaver eras, people would stay in their family houses for decades because you only got one shot to sell and take the money tax-free. So they usually did it right before they bought the beach bungalow and retired. Since 1987, though, you can do this once every 2 years. Holy crap. Now, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, tells us that in general, people live in their houses 5 to 8 years. So by doing nothing different than you normally would, you're going to generate 8 to 10 opportunities in your life to take $500,000 of profit tax-free. I know of nothing that is that good anywhere.
Oh, and I stumbled across this. Like when I bought my first property in 2002, that wasn't even on my radar. I was just trying to get, somebody said to own property. Great, fine, I'll own the property. And then when I started trying to figure out how to sell the property, and they were like, and here's the first, your first amount of profit tax-free. I'm like, what? Like, how? That's
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to do this again.
Once
And
every 2
again.
years.
And then I got my husband on board and he was like, no, that's not real. I'm like, oh yeah, it's real. Let's go do it. So eventually he was like, let's not move nearly as often as we were maybe.
You and I are kindred spirits. My wife said the same thing. She goes, if this is good, but does it ever stop? It's every 2 years, babe.
Right. Let's make our fortune first and then we'll stop.
Now, there's a couple ways that you can really juice this up. So remember, the requirement is that you live in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it. So let's say you started with that. You graduated from college, you saved up some money, you bought your first house, you moved into it, you loved it. And now you're sitting there going, you know what? Maybe I want to become a real estate investor. So you move out of that house and go live somewhere else. Go buy your next house. You can rent that for 3 more years and still get all the profit tax free. Why? Because the requirement is you have to have lived in it 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it. So if you live in it for 2 years and then rent it for 3 years, making sure that your dates line up, you're going to get 3 years of appreciation, 3 years of cash flow, 3 years of depreciation, 3 years of learning how to be a landlord. And then when you sell it, the first $500,000 of profit is tax-free. You ready for gas on the fire number 2?
Yes.
You still have to recapture depreciation on that property.
Mm-hmm.
You also may have more than $500,000 in profit. So what you do when you sell that property is you take the first 500, you actually do a 1031 exchange. Why can you do that? Because it's an investment property, isn't it? Yeah. So you do a 1031 exchange, but you take $500,000 in what is called boot. You pull it out. Normally that would be taxable using a 1031 exchange. But wait, did you live in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it? You sure did. So you get to sell that property, take your $500,000 primary residence exclusion, and 1031 all of the rest of the profit and the depreciation recapture into the new property. So part of your gain becomes tax-free, part of your gain becomes tax-deferred. What's wrong with that?
And just rinse and repeat.
Well, that's exactly right. Now, let's go the opposite direction because you just hinted at it. What if there's a property I've been 1031ing for years, for a while, and I'd like to move into it? I'll tell you the story. Well, actually, I'll tell you David Vick's story. We started out in Golden, like I said, and we were trying to build towards a 10-year goal of moving onto a sailboat. So during our time in Denver, we did several primary residence sales because we got all that money tax-free. We also started buying investment properties after the first disastrous fix and flip. And then as we got ready to move to water, because you know very well, there's really no sailboat water anywhere near Colorado. So we positioned all of our investment portfolio using 1031 exchanges to Stamford, Connecticut. And when we were ready to move there, we converted one of those properties into our primary residence. We sold our last primary residence in Denver. All that money went into the kitty. For the sailboat, we moved into one of our former investment properties in Stamford, Connecticut. Now, that conversion does not generate a taxable event. But with a 1031 exchange, if you do that conversion, once you have owned it for 5 years, once you have lived in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it, then you can sell it and you get to prorate the amount of gain between the years you rented it and the years you lived in it. And you get the years you lived in it tax-free. So you don't get all of it tax-free, but you get part of it tax-free. We actually did it before 2008 when you got all of it tax-free, which is pretty darn awesome. But the IRS caught on to that and said, no, no, no. And they changed the law. But you still get to prorate that. Now, we had learned a couple things during that time. One of them was that Long Island Sound never gets warm. So Stamford, Connecticut was not where we were going to be. So during that time, we moved all of our investment real estate to Florida. And when we were ready to move out the door, what did we do? We sold our last Connecticut property. That was our primary residence. We took the money tax-free. We moved into one of our investment properties in Florida. That was not a taxable event. And all of that tax-free money went to buy the sailboat. And when we finally sailed away, we had a fleet of vacation rentals in Cape Coral, Florida. We had a sailboat we paid for with cash. And our last act out of the door was to sell that last primary residence and use that to buy our first groceries and some other stuff. And that's how the 121 1031 can work so well in combination.
It's so powerful. So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I do have a question here because I think this was on everybody's mind, especially during the election and the, throughout the first year of, the administration, is what could possibly happen rules and regulations wise to the 1031. I know it sounds like that chatter is kind of like died down a little bit, but like let's talk about the elephant in the room here.
Yeah, man, there was a lot of fear for a while, wasn't there? Mm-hmm. Especially me, because I thought I'm just going to lose my job here. Darn. But every president since I've been doing this, so that's 23 years now. And back, we actually did my first 1031 before that. So every president I've been under has talked about doing something with 1031. That's not really new. President Biden made a lot more noise than anybody else, but the statute itself, to give people some comfort, has been in place since 1920. And it's really not been messed with, other than, you won't believe this, the one president you would think who would never have touched it changed it, and that was President Trump. Under President Trump, 1031 used to be real estate for real estate or personal property for personal property. Like that big 747 of his, he could have done a 1031 exchange and bought another 747. But he eliminated the personal property section of it. That's the only thing that has been done to that significantly in 100 years. So it's a very, very embedded part of the tax code. And here's why. When you look at what it does, if you take away the 1031 exchange, you're going to be taking away the opportunity for people to save, generally capital gains, which is at 15% federal. But if you take away that, you're going to decrease the number of transactions dramatically because people aren't going to sell because they have to pay tax. So if people don't sell, that means that if I don't sell my properties, the person who wants to come up and become an investor isn't going to be able to start buying their properties. So it creates this stagnation inside real estate investing. Here's what else doesn't happen. 2 realtors don't get commissions. 2 title companies don't get title insurance. 2 painters don't get to freshen up a house. 2 appraisers don't get to appraise a house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And do you know what all of those vendors have in common? They pay ordinary income tax on their efforts, which is 30 to 40%. So you eliminate 1031 exchanges, you get 15% on that transaction, and you lose 40% on a dozen other transactions that aren't going to happen. So it was a lovely thing to promise in the campaign because it looked like it was going to affect Elon Musk and all the fat cat investors. But the average 1031 exchange is only $400,000. It's not for the fat cats. It's you and me. And so as all of the wiser people in the room started explaining this, it went from, well, okay, I won't get rid of it, to I'm only going to get rid of it for the rich people, to, well, that's really not going to make much difference, is it? To, I'm not going to get rid of it. So here's where we stand today. He's quit talking about it because he's got bigger fish to fry. The Senate did a unanimous voice vote for their budget saying 1031 exchanges will not be changed. And that was unanimous. The House of Representatives came out with their version of the House Ways and Means. It did not mess with the 1031 exchange, and it didn't mess with the step up in basis. So 1031 once again has survived, and honestly, I think it always will. It's too good of a part of the tax code that benefits too many people like you and me.
Awesome. And thank you for like kind of putting some of those fears to rest, that people were having, especially towards the end of last year, and just the uncertainty, right? Like if you're, if you're going, I know for me now that I'm, well into real estate investing, and that's one of the major ways that I can keep my gains tax free. Like, how far down do I go? How far down this rabbit hole do I go if all of a sudden that's at risk of disappearing? So thank you for kind of explaining that.
Defer. I can't help you with the last one, Whitney. If I solve that one, I'll let you know.
Oh, awesome. Well, guys, I want to make sure we leave some time for our after party. This is a great time if you're joining us live to pop your questions into the Q&A box for our after party session with myself and Dave. But before then, Dave, I want, what is the number one piece of investing in advice or something that you want investors to take away from this episode today?
This is kind of a cautionary tale for the 1031 that I think will help people execute them better. And that is, investors have to learn when they're doing 1031 exchanges that there's a poison pill. And the poison pill of 1031 investing is that the best time to sell your property and start a 1031 exchange, as you know, is the worst time to find your replacement properties. And everybody goes, well, that's why I'm not going to do 1031 because I can't do it. Well, but the poison pill never goes away, because the best time to buy a new property and complete an exchange is the worst time to get your old property sold. So no matter how you go or what part of the market you're in, there's a challenge for you. And you just have to understand that challenge and work through it. If you're in an up market today, you can't expect to find your replacement properties at the same price that you sold or that you bought your other properties. It's just not going to happen. So why do I want to do a 1031? Well, because you can still move from appreciation to cash flow. You can still move away from capital expense items coming up. You can still move into better financing. You can still move into better refinance opportunities. You can still move into different sectors. So know why you're ready to move so that you don't have unrealistic expectations. And then the other thing is, and you would know this as well too, shop hard and shop fast. And that doesn't just mean at Bed Bath & Beyond. You really got to be focused, don't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. And I'm glad I could be the guinea pig of the episode. Thank you for sharing.
I've got your poster in my office.
That's funny. Well, Dave, thanks so much for joining us today. Don't go anywhere. We've got our after party session coming up. But if somebody wants to get started with the 1031 exchange and explore the options, how can they find you?
Yeah, the best thing to remember, two things. The 1031 exchange starts with the sale of your old property. And your intermediary, that's the kind of thing that we do, has to be in place prior to the sale. So know those two things. And all you got to do if you want to hook up with us is go to the1031investor.com.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to register at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com for any future masterclass sessions and to check out our open deals. And until next time, we will see you guys later.